Unfortunately, Phil Schuman was not able to be here this evening. He's on the East Coast. But even better, don't tell him, even better. LA Weekly, remember, everyone knows Jill Stewart, right? She's been speaking here over the years. Jill Stewart is the editor of the LA Weekly. And Gene Mattis is in charge of political reporting for LA Weekly. So he's not a pretty face. Well, he's a person that actually digs up the dirt and writes the stories, and he has offered to fill in for Phil Schuman, and he'll be the moderator this evening with John Eisen, who will be assisting him. So once we get to the camera people here. Okay. Everyone take a seat. Okay. The candidates can take a seat in front of their names. And you can stand. Gene Mattis, you're in charge. You have the agenda, and we're going to have a very tight meeting, and we're going to get a lot accomplished this evening. Gene?
Great, thank you. So here's the order of business. I've been told that we have an hour for this, so we're going to try to keep it snappy. And that means that not everyone is going to get to answer every question, unfortunately. It's not going to be completely fair in that way. First thing we're going to do is a 90-second opening statement, and we'll go down this way for the order there. So Councilmember Perry, and then on down the line. After the opening statements, there will be a round of questions from me, and each candidate will have a minute to respond to that, and then, I guess at my discretion, certain candidates will have 30 seconds to respond, so if you want to respond, throw your hand up, or I might call on you. Following that, there will be the thing everybody's been waiting for, which is the candidates asking questions of each other. So hopefully we can keep that civil. And so we'll do that for 2 rounds. So each candidate will have an opportunity to ask questions of 2 different people. And then following that, we will turn to John for the lightning round. And those will be a bunch of questions that have essentially one-word answers, so we should be able to complete that fairly quickly. Following that, we will have questions from the audience. You guys have submitted all these questions, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can. We have about 20 minutes for that. And then we have a final question, 30 seconds each for that, and then closing statements, and then we'll go in the opposite order for closing statements. And then after that, the candidates will be here until midnight, I'm sure, to answer all your other questions that we didn't have time to get to. So, with all that understood, let's start with the opening statements. And let's start
and just so everyone understands, there's a timer, Bobby Anderson, 15 seconds to stop. Please keep the mic, you have to share, this is sharing. There's, the 2 people will share 1 mic, and please keep it within an inch of your lips so everyone in the back can hear it. And people in the back, please be quiet.
All right, so let's start with the opening statements, and let's start with Councilwoman Perry.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good evening. It's been a long day. I've been up since 6 o'clock this morning. My name is Councilwoman Jan Perry, and I'm running to be the next mayor of the city of Los Angeles on March 5th, 2013. I have worked very, very hard the last 11 years to bring new revenue into the city's general fund so that we can continue to provide fire, police, sanitation, the core city services that a city should focus on. I am tough enough to turn Los Angeles around. And let me give you the greatest example that I can give you. And even though you don't live near there, it affects you because it's brought a new revenue. It's downtown Los Angeles. Over the last 11 years, I have brought $15 billion of new investment into the city of Los Angeles, $40 million in new tax revenue over the next 20 years to our general fund, and $70 million in our parks, our libraries, our infrastructure in the area that I represented. I can do that for the entire city of Los Angeles. And I have made my district the economic engine for the entire region. But I want to focus on delivering core city services to make sure that we have a level playing field. I want to renegotiate our employee contracts, our pension agreements to sustainable levels with every employee paying their fair share of health care and pension costs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you, Gene, and thank you to Richard, the entire board, and everybody who's here tonight from the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. It is great to be back here, and it's great to be home. I came straight home from the hospital as a newborn to a house on Woodcliff Avenue. I spent probably every afternoon as a young boy in the Sherman Oaks branch library. Rode the RTD bus every single day, and if I wasn't at Tower Records, I was at the Sherman Oaks Galleria. Going to Lorena to catch a movie, or maybe even to Mogo's to have something exotic like Mongolian food. This was a place that very much shaped who I am, that brings me here today, and that makes me want to make sure that this city works again for all of us. A place where we can define ourselves not from where we come from, or the place that we come from, how much money we have in our pocket, the language we speak, but we're defined by our dreams. A place where City Hall works again. And our campaign has shown that we are the independent voice in this race. Somebody who is able to not only produce in the neighborhoods that I've represented in the heart of Los Angeles, which have had some of the most dramatic turnarounds that we've seen in areas like Hollywood, where you wouldn't have gone 15 years ago, but now have become these great engines of opportunity. But also to have a city hall that does the basic things that I've done as a council member. Solves your problems, returns your call, makes sure that you get an answer, and fixes those things with the quality of life that is there. As an independent leader, as somebody who's had a record of leadership, I ask you for your vote tonight. I ask you to go to ericgarcetti.com to find out more information, and I really want to thank my fellow candidates as well for being up here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here at Sherman Oaks. It's good to be back at SOHA in my old stomping grounds. My father started a church and was married just around the corner here. This is a community where we have worked tirelessly together to preserve our neighborhoods. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone we don't have with us anymore, Ellen Vukovic, who was one of those people who rolled up her sleeves and so made a difference in our communities and our neighborhoods, and is really missed. We have a long history of working together to talk about issues, whether it be transportation, and to make sure that we address the issues in our communities. And as mayor, I'm going to make sure that I'm mayor for all of Los Angeles. That we can ensure that if you live in this neighborhood, we're going to bring Hollywood home. We're going to create opportunities for our young people. And we're going to make sure we get rid of that business tax here in LA. I will work with all of you to make sure that we look at reducing traffic congestion with more transit options, bike lanes, and all of us work together before Measure R to say, how do we deal with going from the valley to the west side? And I used my money to say there are ways that we can go under there and ensure that we get our fair share here in the valley. And as a mom of a kid in public education, I know that we here at LAUSD, we need to reform education and work together with people like Tamar Gallinson. This is my home and my community, and my son sends his love. You all were here when he was born, not actually there, but close. And he couldn't be here sick, but I look forward to representing you again as mayor of Los Angeles. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you to the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association for hosting tonight's event. You know, the city got some good news today, much needed good news. We found out that tourism is at a record high. And in Los Angeles, tourism should be at a record high. We have amazing attractions, rich history, beautiful beaches, great weather, and an amazing culture and diversity here in Los Angeles. Yet with all of those advantages that result in record high tourism, we still have a city government that cannot balance the budget, that cannot pave the streets, that cannot fix the sidewalks, that cannot meet national standards for fire department response times. We have a city government that has made so many bad decisions that we're on the brink of bankruptcy. For those of us that live here, we are living in a city in crisis. We have a jobs crisis, a budget crisis, an infrastructure crisis, a transportation crisis, an education crisis, a corruption crisis, a public safety crisis. And when you put all of this together, all of the advantages that we have, the crises that we live in, you see that what we need is new leadership. I am that new leadership, and I want you to vote for me, Kevin James, on March 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the first round is questions from me, and we'll start with Councilman Garcetti. Mayor Villaraigosa has pushed throughout his tenure for a broad range of education reform items, including the parent trigger law, expansion of charter schools, the use of test scores and teacher evaluations. If you're elected mayor, is that something that you will pursue with equal vigor?
As a former teacher, I will absolutely focus on education. First and foremost, the funding of education, whether you have a child in a charter school, a non-charter school, or one of the mayor's partnership schools. We're supposed to be guaranteed under Prop 98, $7,000 per student per year. We only get $5,700 per student per year, and half of that is paid up front, and the rest in IOUs. So our schools have had to make decisions between cutting adult ed. Today I was at a press conference in Van Nuys to look at the aviation program that was cut there and is threatened with going away, even though we're hiring 30,000 new aviation mechanics, good vocational jobs for folks who may not have college degrees. And if you look at other states where, for instance, in Massachusetts, $14,000 per head per student, we have to make sure, first and foremost, we fight for those resources. But second, I would use city resources in our schools as well. And that's one of the areas of collaboration that we haven't seen as much. But in my own district, we used our city funds to build ball fields, to build libraries and parent centers and tech centers. As a former teacher and as the grandson of a teacher, this is critically important.
Thank you very much.
And I would do that as your mayor.
I'd just like another 15 to 30 seconds actually to just talk about specifically the parent trigger, charter schools, teacher evaluations, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think that teacher evaluation is critical and that we should be looking at doing that collaboratively with the teachers, because as a former teacher, the best thing I got was feedback from my students that actually then I'd sit down with my department head and we'd work together on how to be better, not just a strict score. The charter schools, I've been a big proponent of charter schools and helped many of them get up and running, and I think they've been healthy to have both charters and non-charters together to compete, because when you have that, everybody has to up their game. Down the street from Belmont High School, where we had a 75% dropout rate, Camino Nuevo, which is a great charter school, graduated their first year in one of the poorest neighborhoods in LA.
Thank you very much.
95% of their kids.
I don't know who else wants to get in on this, but let's go with Kevin James and see what he wants to say.
Sure, Gene. Thank you for mentioning the parent trigger. On radio show, I was on KABC and KRLA for many years. I was one of the first, if not the first, media outlet that gave a microphone to the parent revolution that created the parent trigger legislation. See, I think it's critically important that we incentivize parents to be involved in their kids' education. I also published an article in the Huffington Post calling for the LAUSD to implement a trade tech diploma to bring vocational education back into our classrooms, because not everyone is going to be college bound, and we need to bring arts. We need to bring arts back into the schools too.
And then let's just have one more from Jim Perry. We'll get to you in a minute. You have
30 seconds. Okay, this is really fast. I believe in giving parents choices on how their children are to be educated. I believe that we should make sure that everyone's child in the city has the opportunity to be educated in a manner they can go to a 4-year college if that's what they choose. The Los Angeles Trade Technical College and the community college system has a relationship with LAUSD to allow students to go from high school directly into community college now. As a mayor, I will support that and advocate on behalf of that to push adult education as a pathway into the middle class and to make sure we have a good mix of schools.
Let's move on to the next question. We got to kind of keep it moving here to get to all the stuff that we have to get to. So this one's for Wendy Gruhl, and it's about the DWP. There was a consultant's report about 6 months ago that showed that DWP salaries are 26% higher than those of similar workers at other utilities. The report suggested a 10% reduction in labor costs, which could save 1 to 2% for ratepayers on their utility bills. And the ratepayer advocate has suggested that the utility could do more outsourcing and save money that way. Is that an analysis that you agree with? And do you think that DWP salaries need to be brought into line with those of other utilities? And that's a minute.
I'm sorry?
A minute.
Thank you. We have had a problem where DWP workers have made more than city workers, and we've had an outflow of some of our employees over to the Department of Water and Power. I have fought very hard as the city's controller to make sure that we hold the Department of Water and Power accountable. You may recall, I was one who stood up and said they were holding the city hostage by suggesting they did not have the money to be able to ensure that we could, in fact, have the services necessary at LA. I think it is important that study to look at the comparison, sit down not only with the DWP leadership, but the labor leadership, and ensure that we have a balance, and to look at the salaries and compare them to others. The ratepayer advocate, unfortunately, was voted by the public, and it took almost a year before they had their first report to be able to say, here are some of the options. I look forward to working with the ratepayer advocate and the Department of Water and Power and the labor unions to look at how we have a more balanced and ensure not only do we treat our employees fairly, but we also are competitive.
Let's go with Jim Perry for 30 seconds on that question as well. The question was about DWP salaries, whether they ought to be brought into line.
Yeah, I am a former chair of the Energy and Environment Committee, and I've also been a fierce advocate to put the truth about the Department of Water and Power out on the table for the public to understand and to consume. As long as there are people in the city who say they have to pay their water bill, their power bill in installments, I will continue to fight fiercely to make sure that we have salary equality on health care costs and pension costs, and that DWP salaries are on par with salaries for other city employees.
And let's go to Eric Garcetti for 30 seconds as well on that question.
There's no question that we have to have parity. There's no question that we have to make sure that that gap does not continue to grow. And if you notice, it's not just the gap between those who work at the DWP and other city workers, but I think the question was between utilities, right? Other utilities,
right.
Neighboring utilities. And I think we also have to look at where we're getting our power and make sure that that is someplace that is also reflecting our values. Very proud to have worked on a feed-in tariff to allow us to be able to put solar power on our roofs and to get ourselves out of coal, which destroys our earth, eventually will cost us all more, and solar power over the long term is cheaper. So it's not just the workers, but the power too.
Slightly like with a different topic, this is for Kevin James, and this is for 60 seconds. You used to, on your radio show, talk a lot about the illegal alien crisis. You talked before about the education crisis and the transportation crisis. The illegal alien crisis was a big theme of the radio show, and it hasn't been a theme of your mayoral campaign. And the question is sort of, at what point did you change your mind about that issue, or have you changed your mind about that issue?
This question earlier today, you know, one of the things that we have with the immigration problems that we have in our country and our community has to do with the fact that in Washington they want to make it a political football. We haven't had success with either party. And one of the things that I've done, even before I was a candidate, worked with the National Association of Latino elected officials as a lawyer, using my pro bono hours to help people that come to this country legally, that don't break the law to come here illegally, but people that want to come here legally. And it's amazing what you learn in that process of just how obstructive our national system is for bringing people into the country. So, Gene, to answer your question directly, I recognize that it is something that we need to deal with as a community. And it is. Many people would say that it is a crisis, just yet another crisis that has been caused by failed government. It's
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's go to Councilman Garcetti, grabbing for the microphone now for 30 seconds.
You know, one of the things that I would like to do, I think this city has been founded on immigration. This country is its core value. And whether it's high-end immigrants who we ask after they get their great engineering and PhD degrees to please leave the country so they can start their successful companies in other places, or our low-end manufacturing jobs where there's nobody else to fill them, and when we have raids, we suddenly shut down the only clothing factories we still have left here. And I say this as the grandson of a guy who was in the schmata business himself. This is a place where we have to be the leader in immigration. I've been proud to advise the President on immigration reform, to have been working with him now to put forward a comprehensive package on immigration reform, and I strongly support that as a pathway to citizenship.
Thank you.
And one more Controller Gruhl on the question of illegal immigration.
As mentioned, we are a community of immigrants, and that we have so many individuals who have struggled to get a good education. And I supported the Dream Act for young people who came here at 2 years old and have done so well in good education and want to be able to get that good job and to be able to give back to the communities that gave them so much. And that we have to look at the federal government, who hasn't failed in getting national immigration reform, and hope that this year they will do that. We need to focus in on quality of life for our community and be able to have a good education for all.
Last question, let's move on to a different topic. Last question is for Jan Perry. That's the last one from me. You talk a lot in your campaign about building density around transit corridors, especially in your own district. There's talk about now a transit corridor here in the valley along Van Nuys Boulevard. And I'm wondering if you think it would be appropriate to upzone Van Nuys Boulevard to get mixed-use developments and retails, to serve that transit needs.
Well, first and foremost, you have to respect people's community plans or their specific plans and understand that that is the holy grail because that's the manifestation of people's hopes and aspirations for their community. But secondly, if you want to do something about traffic congestion, the greatest thing we can do on a citywide basis is build housing on transportation corridors, housing for young people, people who are starting out with their lives. You know, I can say this because I'm 57. We're in the older generation in here in this room, and people may not want to get out of their cars, but younger people are far more open-minded and far more flexible and have the ability and the willingness to take public transportation. So I want to build a city that prepares itself for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let's turn to the final Kevin James, I guess.
It amazes me that we hear from an elected official talking about the importance of community plans. Those of you here in Sherman Oaks, how often do you feel like City Hall pays attention to the community plans? You know, City Hall has the attitude, it's so sue me. That's what has happened so often. They will variance projects to death. You know that. You've lived that. So in an election, they'll talk about following the specific plan, following the community plans. But what we need to do is enforce those plans.
Thank you very much.
We need an independent outsider to do so.
And the last one on that is specifically on Van Nuys Boulevard, greater density along Van Nuys Boulevard.
Well, we have worked so closely together over the years to ensure that we preserve our neighborhoods. We have had some extraordinary fights where we have done it together. We have fought together, and you all have been at the table with us to deal with those issues. We have 405-101, the worst intersection in the entire country. Worst intersection. We have to look at the kinds of transportation that is critically important. As I mentioned earlier, not only going under the 405, but looking at how we have our fair share in the San Fernando Valley for that public transportation. And I talked to Congressman Sherman about making sure we get our fair share here in the San Fernando Valley to have that seamless transportation.
Thank you.
So that's that, and let's move on now to the round where candidates get to ask each other a question. In terms of the timing, the answers, you get 90 seconds for this one, so a little bit more breathing room there. But for the questions, we'd like to keep the questions somewhat compressed and not make a speech during the question. And the timekeeper will be on you about that. So you can choose whoever you want to ask a question of, and let's start with Wendy Grohl for that.
I have this question for Jan Perry. As a community here in the San Fernando Valley, and particularly as we look at preserving our neighborhoods, can you list two things that you have done that have benefited particularly the Sherman Oaks area in our community?
Well, before I was elected to office, I was a staff person who actually participated in a very vigorous level on working on the Ventura Boulevard specific plan, and in fact had been a planning deputy when this district went all the way over to Coldwater Canyon and included Ventura Boulevard. And so I am very aware, I am very mindful of the height limitations, of the traffic mitigation issues on the Ventura Boulevard corridor, about the concerns about mixed use at the time the plan was drafted, and I watched it actively over the years that I have served to see how it has evolved along with the rest of the city. So I am very engaged, and I have been very engaged even before I decided to run for office.
Thank you. Let's go to Kevin James, a question from one of your competitors.
My first question for Councilman Garcetti. When Wendy Grohl was on the City Council, she supported DWP pay raises. As Controller, she has released audits related to the DWP. Now the LA Times is reporting that the DWP union is planning to raise and spend significant money to get Wendy Grohl elected mayor. Does this relationship between the DWP and Ms. Grohl constitute a conflict of interest?
Okay,
The question was for me, and there's 90 seconds, so I'm not a lawyer, full disclosure. I come from a family background.
actually, before you hold the clock, I know there are a lot of Kevin James people over here, just so everyone in the room knows that, and we'd appreciate it if you just control your enthusiasm because it could interfere. Anyways, Mr. Garcetti?
Look, I think the question cuts to the heart of who of us can be the most independent. When we see outside interests come in and try to buy elections, it is something for all of us to give pause and to consider. I like the rules the way that they are, the way that the voters have voted for them here. We have campaign limitations. I've strengthened those sometimes so people who are bidding on contracts with our city shouldn't be giving donations to people running for office or in office, and that we all have an even playing field. In fact, I'd like to make it even more even. I've been a long-time supporter of public financing for our campaigns so that we might actually, like normal countries, have a 2-month election instead of a 2-year election simply because we have to go out there and spend so much of our time begging for money. But I do believe that if people spend a lot of money on you in an election, they are doing it just because they love you. They want something from you, and that's something to consider.
I think Controller will deserve at least 30 seconds to respond to that, out of fairness.
I am proud of what I've done as a city controller, being the fiscal watchdog, and yes, going after the DWP. You know what I've learned as the controller? Sometimes you make people mad, even your friends. That's what I will continue to do no matter what. Independent expenditures are just that, independent. This is political schemes that they have out there. I will continue to be that independent watchdog. I will continue to be the person who focuses in on creating jobs in our communities. And I'm proud that I have so much support across the Sierra Canada Valley, many of you in this room. Thank you very much.
Now let's move to Councilwoman Perry, question for one of the employees.
Oh, all right. Do I get to choose?
You can pick whichever.
Okay. Well, why don't I choose my friend on the right, Mr. Garcetti. I've talked a little bit about, actually I've talked a lot about my intention to bring the city employee unions back to the negotiating table and deal with our city deficit. Now, I've talked about that openly. For example, LAPD officers contribute 10% for healthcare, 11%, up to 11% other employees pay less. What are you going, all right, I'm doing it. All right. Anyway, what are you going to do to level the playing field so that we have healthcare costs and pension costs reined in for all of our city employee unions?
Thank you, and thank you for having been a partner in much of what we did over the last 4 years. 4 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, it was projected this city would be bankrupt in 5 years because of the economic downturn. It was projected this year we would have a $1 to $1.2 billion deficit. This past year, when we looked at the gap that we had to close and that we did in this past year's budget, it was just over $200 million. In other words, 80% less than what had been projected. And that largely came because of negotiations that I led and implemented on pension reform. We had some city employees who paid as little as 2% out of pocket, 2% of their salary, to get lifetime health care, to get their pensions, etc. Some paid 5 or 6. All of them, as Ms. Perry mentioned, now pay 11%. Our officers also and our firefighters do as well. That's an immensely difficult thing to negotiate. And I didn't just negotiate, I went to the ratification meetings where city employees were there. No other city leader showed up because it's politically easier not to be at those moments. But to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, is what you need to see as a quality in your next mayor. For the first time, we have employees paying out of pocket for their health care. When health care costs tripled, who cared? We as employees paid 0 out of pocket for it, so we didn't feel that. Now we have some skin in the game. But I have shown while we can cut and be serious about pensions, I don't think taxing you more and cutting more services and pensions is the route forward. We have to grow our economy, get rid of our city's business tax, bring businesses back, and make sure we have job training to bring those jobs here that will grow the base once again.
Thank you.
And the last question is from Mr. Garcetti.
Okay, my question is for Ms. Brule. Maybe I'll stay with the topic that was raised. We all read, or maybe many of us read in the paper about the impact of outside money coming into this campaign through independent expenditures and super PACs. I don't think that they're just independent, or in the sense that we're not powerless. And in Massachusetts, I don't know if many of you follow this, but Scott Brown, a Republican, and Elizabeth Warren signed a pledge to keep super PACs and independent expenditures out of their race. They agreed to do the following. to donate to charity half of whatever outsiders spent on their behalf. And I'm willing to make this pledge with you tonight, that we would say that publicly to our friends, people we've worked with, people who are endorsing us, etc., who are acting independently, that we will pledge to spend half of whatever they do and give it to a charity of the other person's choice. Would you make that pledge with me?
Answer the question, half of where the money comes from. Where's the?
From our own campaigns.
Right now, I have no idea because it's independent about how much anyone's going to spend in this race. And again, it's independent. I pledge what I have said as the candidate for mayor of Los Angeles, that the money I've raised in my campaign has come from people, most of 50% of them less than $250 to give me to be able to do for my campaign. I don't believe I can give their money away for that purpose. What I will do, as I continue to say, is that you have to be transparent about any kind of independent expenditures, and I fought for that on the national level and fought to ensure that we have a system that allows people to have a voice in who's elected, and particularly to make sure that we let those individuals in our communities and our neighborhoods. I'd be more than happy to see your pledge and see exactly what that is, but tonight is the first I've heard about it, and most importantly, what I'm doing is going and talking to people around the city of Los Angeles and telling them I'm going to fight for good jobs in the city of LA, I'm going to fight for good public safety, and I'm going to make sure we have a good educational system and to use my voice. That's what I've done as your council member. That's what I've done as the city controller in identifying $160 million in waste, fraud, and abuse. So I appreciate the somewhat of a gimmick that you're suggesting tonight, but I think what the public wants to make sure is that we're talking about the issues that are important to our communities and our neighborhoods, and I will continue to do that.
Thank you. I'll go around on this, and we'll start with Kevin James. It'd just be good if we could, I think it seems like we've dealt with the independent expenditure issue, so if we could move on from that issue or something else.
Promise I'll move on from that, Gene. My question is for Ms. Brewer. Ms. Brewer, in a January 2010 memo, you directed the City Council to take tens of millions of dollars from infrastructure funds, like the Fire Hydrant Fund and the Special Parking Revenue Fund, and transfer that money to the Reserve Fund. The Council followed your direction and transferred the money. You are the city's chief accountant. Was this transfer of public funds legal or illegal?
I'll take that from you. I'm quite popular today. I think that's great. Because what it means is I'm talking about issues that are important to you. Yes, I sent a letter in 2010. I sent letters in 2009 to the city council and the mayor saying, guess what? You're spending more money than you have. In 2009, I told them, you know what? Every day that you don't act is $1 million more in our budget than what you had budgeted originally. You're spending more. And so when we talk about budgetary cash flow, when I went to the city council and did this, I said, you know what? We're not going to have enough money to pay your bills unless you make the decisions that are necessary to balance the budget. What was done, from my understanding, this was not policy that I determined. This is policy of the city council and the mayor as they look at the budgetary cash flow. What it was raising the red flag that I have done as city controller to make sure that your taxpayer dollars are going for the right things. That your taxpayer dollars are insured to go to fixing our streets, to fixing our potholes, to having public safety. And so this letter that I do each year, and I give warnings each year, is the fact that they were running out of money. And I will continue to do that because I have the fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we pay our bills. The fiduciary responsibility that our firefighters and police officers who are here today, and the police officers, Police Protectively endorsed me today because they know I'm going to be fiscally responsible and make sure that you're safe. So I will continue to do what it takes to make sure we balance our budget.
Thank you.
Okay. As we continue on the second round here, let's make sure that we're asking a question of someone we didn't ask a question of in the first one. And so with that, let's go to Councilwoman. You asked her second.
All right. Ms. Brewer, you have said time and time again that we should eliminate the business tax and remove hundreds of millions of dollars in general fund revenue that pays for police and fire. It's an interesting proposal, but there is no strategy to back up what we do to backfill the loss of that revenue. Who makes up the difference?
I stand here today not only as a controller, but also as a business owner. I have a small business in North Hollywood. 65 years ago, my grandfather started this business. I understand what it means more than anyone else up here, how tough it is to make it in Los Angeles, to make that jobs and keep those jobs in our communities. I proposed and was the architect of business tax reform in 2006. And I heard the same kind of thing that we just heard from Ms. Perry, which was, you will bankrupt the city if you do this. Business tax reform doesn't work. And then the city administrative officer came up the next year and said, guess what? Wendy, we were wrong and you were right. We saw more businesses move into the city of Los Angeles. We saw more businesses that wanted to be part of the city. And so as we look at business tax reform, we did it in a very fair way, ensuring that we didn't take away from the future of the city of Los Angeles. And the proposals that are on the table of axing the tax, which I agree to, is one in which we look at it in a responsible way. Because tomorrow we can't get rid of $460 million. But what we are going to do is make sure that we move those businesses into the city of LA, that we keep Hollywood in our communities, because many of us know our families are very focused on keeping that kind of jobs here in the San Fernando Valley. So I will continue to be the business-friendly candidate and the business-friendly mayor, and be the city controller and the business owner who says, we can do better and we need to compete. I will do everything in my power to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To remind you, you passed controller rules this time, so.
Thank you. A question for Ms. Perry. Ms. Perry, I know you've worked very diligently on the issue of homelessness in the city. And sometimes in certain neighborhoods where there's less homeless that are directly there, sometimes people think it's just a problem in some of our neighborhoods. Why should folks in Sherman Oaks care about solving, beyond the ethics that we all care about homeless people, why should they care in terms of finances about solving homelessness?
Well, the people of Sherman Oaks should care about the issue like everyone cares about the issue. I don't think you'll find anyone ever who will say, I don't care about homelessness. But what people will understand is that there is always somebody at risk in your community. There is always someone who is grappling with the issues of mental illness, someone who is frail and elderly, someone who is disabled, or there's someone or family who's lost their job and they're just not making enough money to live. So we always have to provide for people who may be at risk and may be at disadvantage. Those people live in Sherman Oaks too. I did the 2000 census count for Mayor Reardon, for the city of Los Angeles. We counted people all over the San Fernando Valley, in the Wash and Summer Tohono, around Hanson Dam, freeway underpasses. There are homeless people. Those are people who just don't have a permanent home. They may not be on the street, but there are teenagers at risk, elderly people at risk. So we have to build to take care of them, to create stability in everyone's life and leave no one behind in Sherman Oaks and in every part of the city.
Your final question.
I almost feel like I want to ask myself a question. This will be for Eric Garcetti. As you know, Eric, you worked with Laura Chick, as I have over the years, and that the controller's job is to be one of the fiscal watchdog for the city, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, to ensure that you know what's happening in the city of Los Angeles. Last week, your campaign attacked me for coming out and saying I was issuing subpoenas, holding a press conference to send a message that these companies, that our cell phone companies, were actually not giving us the money that we owed, and we wanted to make it public that they were not optimizing for the city of Los Angeles. I want to know why it is not okay to let the taxpayers know, which I do on so many instances, to let you know that $160 million worth of waste is out there, and to let you be part of the process, why we should not continue to let the public know what's happening in the controller's office.
Well, first of all, I just want to say to something that you mentioned before, the pledge was no gimmick, and it was something that worked in Massachusetts, the first place that no super PACs actually came to. So absolutely, I look forward to sharing that pledge with you and seeing if we can actually do that. Be a city that is clean in its campaigns and really take away the influence of corporate money, especially at this point. Second, absolutely for those things. I think we talked about the pace that it took and how long it took for those subpoenas to come forward. But I do support, of course, not only looking at things like waste, fraud, and abuse. Nobody up here is for waste, fraud, or abuse. We are for efficiency, though, in the government as well, and making sure things get done quickly. And we've often heard that back, that council hasn't moved quickly enough on things, and this was 10 months, I think, after it was initially put forward. So it was that point alone. But I'm also very proud that we have similarly looked at our revenues in the city. I don't even love fraud, waste, and abuse as a term, by the way. It was invented, I think, in the Reagan administration, by President Reagan, when he was cutting welfare, mental health, and all the other things that we saw happen in this country. To me, I'm about making sure we have good government, and responsive government, and responsible government. The Commission on Revenue Enhancement, something that I put forward, was chaired by Ron Galper, who's running for controller now, Cindy Sikowski, who's a councilwoman, members of unions, and others, looked at the money that we're not getting, and what we could do, not just for a couple $100,000 here, a couple $100,000 there, but $500 million worth of funding that we're leaving out there on the table, collecting taxes from our parking and other things like that.
Thank you.
Very proud to have done.
Thank you very much.
We're going to turn it over now to John Eisen with the lightning round. These are one-word answers.
Lightning round, that was the
We're going to start here, and yes or no, short answer, go right to the right. We'll start with Councilperson Perry. What should be the retirement age for city non-uniform employees? So short answer.
67.
We just voted on making it 65.
65.
67, as I published in the LA Times and the local
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Mr. Garcia. We'll start with you. What should be the retirement age for city uniform employees?
I think it's years of service most important. We don't want officers there way long. I would put that, I think we've had up to 55 or 57.
Your answer?
55 or 57.
I think it's been 55 and 30 years of service.
57 for the physical exertion, but longer service to provide training and their experience for a few years after to get more out of them.
We need to capitalize on the depth and breadth of people who have served for many years. I happen to sit next to someone who's been serving the city for 42 years, a former chief of police. So he's still in good shape, and I think he's close to 70 years old. So the answer is, as long as they're fit, maximize their service, but in terms of being uniformed personnel on the street, you know, they have physical abilities that usually begin to wind down in their 60s.
All right, Ms. Roll. Yes or no? Should the city retirement plans for new employees be changed from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan?
Do you want a yes or no on
Yes or
that?
no?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No, costs more.
Mr. James, do you support the 1/2 sales tax increase in the city on the March ballot?
Absolutely not, and I signed the opposition message to that on the ballot. No.
I signed the opposition argument, and I said no.
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 Ms. Perry, do you support a $3 billion bond measure in the city to pay for infrastructure repair and to be paid as part of property taxes?
No, I voted no.
It was sent back to committee today.
No, without, no public input before it went before the city council, so no.
They've been failing at this for over a decade, but the answer is no on the $3 billion taxes from you.
Mr. Garcia, yes or no? Do you support changing Proposition 13?
Absolutely not for residential and closing loopholes, but otherwise no changes.
Absolutely not for residential, and actually similar to Mr. Garcetti, which is looking at the other consideration units.
Absolutely not, except there are areas, for example, in connection with a country club that has been in place for a very long time, and the LLC loophole. That's it.
For residential, no, it's not even realistic to even discuss it any further. But corporate loopholes, yeah, I think we should take a look at those.
Starting with Ms. Gruhl. As mayor, will you voluntarily submit to performance audits in your office by the city controller?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not only by the city controller, but by an independent outside auditing firm that is not paid for by the special interest.
Thank you.
I think it would
Audits that
be,
we do are actually from the city control seal funds.
I think it would be fantastic to begin to assess the office of the mayor and its performance. I'd like to be examined by places like the Rand Corporation, University of Southern California, USC, and an economic analysis to make sure that the mayor's office is moving this city forward.
All personalities aside, I don't want a controller to do it who's an elected political position. I'm going to open up our data to all the public to see, establish the metrics, allow people in to see that, and you can make those judgments, and any independent party can come in and do it themselves too.
Starting with Mr. James. Do you support repealing the city business tax in full?
No, I support ending the gross receipts method of calculating that tax, but not ending the business tax completely.
No, I don't support eliminating the business tax in full because we don't have any way to backfill the loss of that in the general fund. But what I do support is targeting industries that are having difficulty coming to the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you.
I do. It kills jobs. The study that we commissioned showed 130,000 jobs would come back to Los Angeles if we replaced this tax altogether and got rid of it.
And I was architect of business tax reform. We need to get rid of it, and we need to do it in a responsible way.
Ms. Perry, starting with you. Name the public employee unions that have endorsed you.
I've gotten endorsed by the cement masons, the roofers, and 2 other trades. They're on my website at janperry.com, and that's it.
The Engineers and Architects Association.
All of them.
Public, you said one public.
Public employees.
Public employees, not all the.
Just public employees. Unions.
Start again? No, I haven't been endorsed by any public employee unions. I'm sorry, I should listen to your question.
I'm not going to public employees.
What?
I haven't been endorsed. As mentioned, that the DOD union has performed, and I'm not going to interview endorsement.
I'm the only candidate. I haven't been endorsed by any public sector employee unions. I'm the independent candidate. As you see in the polls today,
Thank you.
there's a slight support from the public.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, I mentioned it earlier. I got supported by the Police Protective League today, so I'm very proud of the police officers who are endorsed these days.
And the final question is the most difficult one. If you make the runoff, will you return here on Wednesday, April 17th for a runoff debate?
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Absolutely.
And as polling shows today, I will be here on April 17th.
As long as there's something good to eat, I will be here.
Good. We're going to go now to our audience questions. And we have time for some of those.
And I guess we're going to have limited time for those questions, but the candidates have said they will remain here as long as it takes to meet with you. So, Jane, what do you got?
We got audience questions, and we got 45 seconds to respond to these, and we're just going to go with like one person to answer each of these. So, first one's for Kevin James. What is your position on the medical marijuana stores?
On my website, kevinjamesformayor.com, you can find a very comprehensive answer, as you can to so many answers. Very unique in this, with regard to this issue. I've been a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, so I understand the enforcement side and the need to keep the medical marijuana facilities away from schools and churches and our communities. On the flip side, I spent years as a board member of AIDS Project Los Angeles in leadership as well. And I understand the very real medicinal value that medical marijuana has as it did for our patients. there's abuse. I mean, lots of 19-year-olds showing up with glaucoma after the city council, passed their so-called ordinance when the pot shops went from 187 up to 1,000. We have to divide up the parts of the city where they are.
Appreciate it.
I want to give credit where it's due. That was Malcolm Mackey's question. The next one is for Jan Perry, and it comes from Janice Klinger. And the question is, what will you do to focus on the issue of climate change?
Well, we have to have a greener city that's more energy efficient, and to create a greater canopy, to have more open space with trees and with water features to cool the city down and try to level it off, have our buildings more energy efficient, conserve our water usage, and be far more engaged in understanding what we can do as individuals, reduce our car trips, carpool, share more within communities, and pool our resources.
Thank you. Next question is for Controller Brule, and it comes from Estelle Tenenbaum, and the question is, what plans do you have to make the city more business friendly?
Well, as I mentioned, getting us off the gross receipts tax, but also making sure that we keep Hollywood here. Being the strong advocate I have as the state on the California Film Commission, and ensuring that we have the kinds of tax incentives that are important. It's also about providing hubs of economic activity around some of our wonderful universities like Cal State Northridge and UCLA and some of our community colleges. We have so many young people who graduate from there that we recruited to come here. We don't recruit to come back and to stay here in Los Angeles. To keep including that technology that we're seeing, technology growth at Silicon Beach. But it's also about making sure we have a city that works. And we have planning and building and safety and DVP and DOT that work together to ensure that the businesses we want to have here in LA to create those industries are so important. And as a small business owner, I get the need for small business and something as well.
The next question is for Councilmember Garcetti. It's from Dwayne Coleman, and we had a similar one from Dorian Thomas, and they're asking about entertainment jobs. So what would you do to stop the exodus of TV and movie production from the city and help make filming easier in all parts of the city?
I'm very proud to represent Hollywood and to have seen an increase in economic output by